right, folks, grab a seat and pour your drink neat as Whiskers and Whiskeys presents, well, I guess what we did conference realignment last time. That should have been considered OTAs, I think. I would consider this OTAs as well. This is our conference championship preview. We talked about, the mess that the conferences are in, losing RIP and piece of the Pac-12, but now in their last season, who knows? Well, it seems like their last season is the Pac-12. We will discuss the outlooks for all the major Power 5 conferences. Maybe the last year we have Power 5, or who knows? I mean, it seems like it. Even if the Pac-4 takes pieces from like the Mountain West and cobbles a couple things together, I still wouldn't consider them a Power 5 conference. Wait, would you?
No. Yeah, no, this is gonna be, we're excited for this, everyone. This is probably the first time. I mean, as you well know, Mike and I are big college football fans, and so we wanted to kind of really test our boundaries of knowledge this year, and decided to do a full college football preview, like Mike had mentioned. So we're going to do this as a competition, like all things that we do on this pod. So we're going to do this like a March Madness bracket style here. So we're going to try to pick who's going to be in each of the Power 5 conference championships. So the two teams for each conference. And so if you get those right, that'll be 1 point. If we pick the conference champion, that will be 2 points. If we pick who gets to the playoff correctly, that'll be 4 points a team. If we pick the right two teams to go to the national championship, that'll be 8 points per team. And then if we pick that champion at the end, that'll be 16. So at the end of the season, we will tally that up, and we'll probably do like a mid-season. How are things going? Are things burnt to the ground, or do we still have things alive? But yeah, we're really excited for this. This is the first time we've done, extensive research on all these different schools and conferences. So we're really excited.
Yeah, I mean, this is like something that like we talked about. Like I really enjoyed. I remember one road trip I took with, I don't know, I think it was a family vacation, or maybe it was a trip with my dad. I can't remember what, but we stopped at like a rest stop, and I picked up the USA Today, conference preview edition. And that was just so much fun to read through and everything. It's just one of the more exciting like parts of the season is like, digging into all these conferences and everything that's coming up. So, I've always like loved doing this type of research over the past couple of years. And it'll be interesting to see how things kind of pan out here, because it's like, I don't know. It just seems like it's kind of set in stone, but then like so many crazy, I mean, every year, it just, something happens, someone surprises you. It's just, in doing the research, I'm not sure like who's going to fall off. Like, I feel like the top 10 in my mind are like pretty solid, but that there's a chance that one of them's just going to end up unranked at the end of the year. And I'm racking my brain to try to figure out who the hell that's going to be, but
I
can't
have
do it.
plenty of thoughts.
Well, I'm also a little distracted because Djokovic and Alcaraz are playing in Cincinnati. Djokovic had a chance to break. It's 6-5 in the third set. Djokovic had a chance to break Alcaraz. He just aced him. Or no, that was a lot. But yeah, looks like we're gonna go to another tiebreak here. It's just exciting. So
I need you to be focused here now.
Well, there's a lot.
This ain't tennis. Okay.
I gotta look out for my Serbian brother. If I don't, who will? So
can you just please ask me how I'm doing? You didn't ask me like you normally do.
Oh, how you doing, bud?
Showtime.
So, do that again.
Woo.
What I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it.
Woo. Can I just say, like in the great famed movie Talladega Nights, I'm all hopped up on Mountain Dew, and I am so ready for this. I've been thinking about this way too long for the last couple of weeks. I'm excited.
I'm excited. I think that you might have thought yourself into a blender a little bit, but I am. I'm right here with you, brother. I'm pumped.
I don't think so. I there's only a couple of things, really, truthfully, that made me go back and forth on, but I guess we'll get through it. But before we get started, let me just say, because we had talked about this like there are some really good college football preview guides out there. And this year we took a shot at purchasing one and really just getting a feel for it because that's a lot of work to do yourself. And why do something when other people already do it well? So there's quite a few different ones, but the one that we picked this year was Pick Six Previews by Brett Ciancia. I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. But I have followed him on Twitter, and he always has pretty insightful things. And his claim to fame is that his preview has been the most correct over the last few years. For our purposes, I was less concerned about his opinions as much as it was him collecting the data. And while I agreed with some of it, other times I think I took a different opinion on the data he presented. But anyway, just wanted to give him a shout out. It was great work. It's like a 175 page document, very thorough.
It is, and like the different statistics that he goes through, like and the charts, like seeing, like because he has red, yellow, and green for like offensive and defensive stats. Seeing those charts lined up, it's really telling. It's like we'll get into it for some of the teams that we talk about. It's like just really interesting how you see like some teams that are a defensive powerhouse and have a crappy offense or vice versa. When you look at the charts, it's like shocking to see sometimes. Right. Yeah.
All right. So why don't we get started? How do you want to do this? We really talked about exactly how we want to.
We're going to go through each conference. We'll go through who we think is going to be in the conference championship, pick the winner for the conference championship. And then we'll pick any dark horses or any teams that we think might disappoint. And then we'll go through and choose our playoffs. And then we'll choose who's going to end up being the champion at the end. So,
all right. So which conference would you like to start with?
Should we go alphabetically? I have everything that I have alphabetically. So
Same.
I mean, do we want to start with the ACC or do we want to start with like the Big Ten? Might be more fun to start with. What do you think?
No, let's just go alphabetically. All of our notes are organized that way. It's fine. We're going to touch on everything anyway. So
yeah.
All right. So why don't you start with yours and then we'll alternate. So then like next conference, I'll start with mine.
All right, cool.
Also, hold on. Do you want to keep track of this? I guess we can just message afterwards.
Yeah, I have a Word doc up, so I can keep track of it. So let's see. My picks, EJ picks, and
just for while he's doing this, real quick for the listeners, what we're going to do is we're going to afterwards, when this episode releases, we are going to have our Instagram post. We'll have a visual of our brackets, and then we're also going to post our brackets on our website as well, whiskerswhiskies.com, so you can see it all year long. All righty.
All right. Okay. And we're all set. All right. So I'll go first. So just to remind everyone too, with the ACC is a divisionless ACC this year, right? So everyone is kind of all in this together, all kind of jumbled up. So I guess maybe I'll start with I'll start with my champion. So I'll start with my championship teams. So getting into the championship game, who I think will be ultimately runner-up in the conference, is Clemson. So, Clemson has kind of been, I was actually hanging out with our buddy Sean today. I feel like Clemson has kind of like been losing their way, right? Like they, Dabo has built like a great program over there, but it's like kind of like it's very cult like, they're all like in this little orange tiger bubble, and everything that they do is like, seeing how they've had success over the past like 10 years or so, like it's kind of similar to the journey that you saw like in Alabama when Saban came in, is that like Saban built the program, brought in a lot of great recruits, had a lot of great coaches. People didn't really leave, like you had really good, coordinators there that stayed for a while. And then you started getting some turnover. So like he lost Venables. They were promoted from within. This time they're actually going outside. They have an outside hire and Garrett Riley come in from TCU, may give the offense the shot in the arm it needs. Realize Will Shipley's still there feel like that guy's been there forever.
Yeah.
I like Shipley is one of those guys who I feel like there's another team that we'll talk about who has a player who I feel like has just been in the NCAA for forever. But like, Shipley's still there. Obviously, they had some question marks at QB. It seems like things are getting settled a little bit there. Like it will Cade Klubnik improve though. Like he came in and spelled Uyunglele and I think had some impressive starts. But like ultimately, will he continue to take a step forward? But they've just been really inactive in the transfer portal overall. The defense was kind of on a skid after losing Venables. Like they had some of the most talented defensive lines in all of college football. And like, I just don't think that they're replenishing that as much as they need to. And like, Dabo said this when they were first winning the ACC championship, like 5,000 people show up whenever they're there off the bus. Now, like no one shows up. It's just kind of expected. So I feel like Clemson's losing their edge a little bit, but there's just too much talent and there's too many incomplete teams in the ACC for anyone to really challenge them. I do have a dark horse in the ACC who I think could potentially beat Clemson, but I don't think anyone is going to top Florida State. That's who I'm picking as my conference champion. Like their 2022, like people forget was like a sneaky good 2022. I think it's because when they beat LSU, that was more of an indictment of LSU than it was Florida State's being good. And then they lost 3 close games to Wake, NC State, and Clemson. But then they were dominant. They beat Florida, they beat Oklahoma in their bowl game. Like they had a really good end of the year. They have starters back on both sides of the ball. They filled some needs in the transfer portal, a tight end, wide receiver. Jordan Travis, their quarterback's going to be a Heisman candidate. Excellent defense. Like I think that they're going to have a tough start to the season because they play LSU again and then at Clemson. But then like look at their schedule. They are chilling until the end of the year when it's Pitt, Miami, Florida, and Pitt's one of those teams that like they have a lot of question marks on offense, but like if things go well, like the guy that they got from Boston College, Jerkovic, he's with his old coordinator from Boston College too. Like if that's a team that I think later in the year, if that offense starts to gel, they could get some things going. So that's going to be, I think, a test for them. I wouldn't be surprised to see Florida State maybe drop the LSU or Clemson game, or maybe both, and go into the conference championship with like 1 or 2 losses. And then if they do lose to Clemson, like I think that there's a chance they lose to Clemson first, and then they end up beating Clemson in the championship game. So that's kind of where I'm sitting. Florida State over Clemson in the championship. I'll get to dark horses and some other honorable mentions, but EJ, you go ahead, bud. What do you think?
I basically just want to like Spider-Man meme you and point at you because we're lockstep here, pretty much everything. So I'll just add a little bit more color, but it's the same 2 and the same champion. So Florida State, yeah, they're returning an already explosive offense. They're returning a lot there. Jordan Travis is back for his like 10th year, it feels like. I feel like he's one of those guys that I just feel like has been in college football for forever. It looks like they had a top 10 rushing attack last year with him because of his RPO ability and his rushing ability, and a top 25 pass pro offense. And I think is it 4 out of 5 starters on the offensive line's back. So they have 2 of the 3 running backs, the starter Trey Benson, who will probably be one of the top running backs in the league or in college football next year. Added Keon Coleman from Michigan State, who was going to be definitely a preseason all Big Ten candidate. So he's a big bodied possession guy. Add Johnny Wilson, who led the nations in yards per catch a year ago. And then they add a big 5-star recruit. I think it said it was the highest in a decade that they've had to round out that receiver room. So offense going to be jamming. And on defense, it was one of the best pass defenses. The weak spot was the rush defense. But a lot of that was due to the injuries they had at defensive tackle. And all but one of those tackles return and a couple blue chip transfers. They got Jared Verse is going to be a projected top 10 pick, one of the top edges off of the board for the NFL. And then you have, his name's Patrick Payton, returns as the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year. I mean, they bring back all 4 backers, and the secondary will miss their safety, Jamie Robinson, who went to the NFL, but they added a couple of top-rated transfers as well. So I agree with you. Ultimately, this is the team to beat. They're basically the same team, but better. Like they have at least equally, each position on that team has either stayed the same or gotten better. And
Yeah.
last year they had a good year. I feel like it was that like proof point that they can do it. I will say Clemson is my other choice in the championship, and it's basically what you said. Like I think Garrett Riley will be a huge addition for them. I don't know that he can turn it around in the first year, but I think that's huge because that's been the problem. Cade Klubnik, 5-star kid, finally got to start and showed something, but he has no offensive skill talent, like beside Will Shipley, who's there for the 20th year. So,
well, and the other running back, Maffa, he's pretty good too.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things I think has been the problem for Clemson is they lost the trenches. Like on the defense, it was okay with Venables, but on the offensive line, they just really had a terrible offensive line. So it just hasn't been good on offense. A lot of that stems from that. And obviously DJU was a miss, but I also question, while I don't think he would have lived up to the billing of, first, top recruit in his draft or in his college class, and obviously all the big endorsements he got at the beginning before he even stepped on campus. But I think some of his struggles was also just that offensive line.
I watched Uyunglele in QB1 on Netflix, as he wasn't even featured. He was a sophomore at Bishop Sycamore or wherever he was at, St. John Bosco, wherever he was. I think St. John Bosco. And I was like, this guy is going to be a big problem.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm kind of surprised that Djokovic won. So I'm also, and he's writing something in Serbian on the camera. So I'm thrilled.
So
that was good.
I mean, I think also and this is probably more of, a reflection of the conference as a whole, but like Clemson in their down years are still winning the ACC. They won it last year. And so you have to be careful counting them completely out.
Yes.
But I think the offense is going to head in the right direction. I don't know that they can completely 180 it next year. I think they'll be better, definitely be better. But then the tough side is the defense. So I don't think they filled enough of those holes because Dabo refuses to believe in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
So
which is
lost,
insane.
Right. So they lost a few pro players, that were the heart and soul of their defense. So I think where the offense will be better, the defense will be a little worse. But like you said, it's a cakewalk schedule. It's really hard to find losses outside of like their 3 biggest games, but that's going to be good enough. Especially since one of them, is non-conference. That'll be good enough to get to the championship. And I agree with you with Florida State. Actually, it's really funny because I went back and forth. I really think they'll lose to LSU. It's whether or not I thought they were good enough to beat Clemson twice. And I'm with you. I'm betting more on losing in Death Valley at the beginning of the year and then re-upping and winning.
Yeah, because two losses, like they'll have the one conference loss, and then they'll and I think someone gets Clemson this year too, so I think they'll both be one loss, conference. They'll have one loss in the conference. It's the question of can Florida State beat LSU? So we'll see, because that's a lot of hype coming into the season. Like I mean LSU, I hate Brian Kelly, but
and his family.
We'll get to that though. We'll get to that when we get to the the SEC. But it makes me feel uneasy because there's some top 10 teams that have historically disappointed in the last decade, and it's really hard to trust them this year. But like all signs point to trusting them, and this is one of those teams for me. Yeah. So I will say that some of the dark horses, or not dark horses, but teams that, two teams that could create some trouble, and then one dark horse. So I think UNC, obviously Drake May, he's a Heisman contender. Like the thing is though, new offensive coordinator, after Phil Longo leaves for Wisconsin, but their defense is just so bad. It's just hard to, think that they're going to make the conference championship. Florida State and Clemson are just more complete teams. And then Pitt, really strong defense, but offense, just way too many question marks, I think, to consider them in the championship right now. And then my dark horse is really not surprised, Miami. Tons of talent, but just can Cristobal put something together? Like they have great recruiting classes. They landed some big transfers. Now they have a new offensive and defensive coordinator. Like that might be the key to getting this all together. That could be a team that's like, again, when you look at Florida State's schedule, having Miami later in the year, like Miami could be a team that gets some steam and gets better as the year goes on, as things start to come together for them. So I could see I could see Miami potentially being in the conference championship game ahead of, either Florida State or Clemson, because if Florida, like both of those teams, I think are capable of getting got if Miami can put something together. What about you? What do you think for the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we are very very similar here too. So I would say, so I kind of had two dark horses and one potential disappointment, but it depends on your definition of disappointment. Sorry, muted myself there. So I agree with you. So I think Pitt is one of my top dark horses because I think Narduzzi now in not only is like, whatever year coaching in general, but even, his fifth, sixth year at Pitt or whatever it is, I think he's earned the trust that he'll figure it out on defense, right? Like I'm not worried about that. I know they lose Kalijah Cansey and stuff like that. Like I get it. I think they had a couple other pros, other kids that go pro on defense too. But I feel comfortable that he will fill those spots. The offense is the big deal, especially losing their running back, which if I'm Israel Abanikanda, I was never could say his name. That's the biggest hurt. I think Jurkovich, however you say it, coming from Boston College. Slovis last year, the transfer they had last year was terrible, and I knew that was not going to work out. But Jurkovich was a Heisman candidate at one point, but he chose to go to Boston College, and so that's kind of what he gets for doing that. But I think he's gonna definitely help. I think he's also a Pine Richland kid. I don't know if you knew that, but he's coming home. Richland is in the North Hills of
I didn't realize. I had to like go back and look because he was dropping Whippio and he was dropping Pine Richland. I'm like, I didn't realize he's a Heisman voter for in Pennsylvania. Okay. So that's pretty. I'm like, so he definitely knows. All these guys. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think Pitt's one. I think Miami, I'm with you. I think that was my other one. They're just so talented. The question is, can they, like, talented as far as just like skill? Like they have so much skill in a lot of positions. Can Van Dyke rebound? He didn't have a very great year after having a lot of hype with him. And I think this is going to be for Miami. I think they have all the pieces. If everything goes perfect, they're up there as far as like skill in all the roster spots. But I think this is probably going to be likely their last year's Florida State year, where they kind of show up, maybe they get to 9, maybe 10 wins, and it just looks a lot better. And then you get year 3 of Cristobal with his guys and all of this highly paid for recruiting classes that are going to be, bridging that upperclassman status. So I think we're looking at next year is where, if everything goes better this year, that next year is the year where you're like, watch out, because they're going to have those pieces in place. He's going to have done all that work on the offensive line, which is his specialty. So I think that, and then I would say my disappointment, again, depending on how you define it, is UNC. So I think Drake May's awesome. He's going to actually have a real chance at going first overall because he is just the prototypical quarterback as far as size, arm strength. Even his mobility is pretty good. Obviously, I know Caleb Williams is, has the potential to be dynamic, but Drake May's fantastic. That offense, because of him, is going to score points. But Phil Longo leaving is a big deal. He was one of the better coordinators. And then that defense is still a mess. So I think he will them to some of these 50-50 games, but I could see them losing, I don't know, 3-4, which could be seen as a disappointment because May is on the team. So it's not, you know what I mean? So I want to caveat that. It's not like that's a bad season by any means. But if you're expecting them to push for the playoff, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Anything else on the ACC?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, do you want to lead us off for the Big Ten then?
Nailed it. Yes, I sure do. Okay. So this is actually where I think we're going to have a disagreement. Based on so for the listeners, we really truthfully haven't talked about this purposely.
We have
saved
not
it for the pod. We made a couple of comments here and there, but not really. But I think one of the comments you made, I think we're going to disagree on I guess potentially our dark horse. So we can just start with we'll start with the West because that stinks. So the Big Ten still has East and West. Historically, the East is the beast, the West is a joke and should never be invited to Indianapolis, but they still get their representative, and this will be the last year that they get these terrible teams into the Big Ten championship game. So I think it's really a two horse race and between Iowa and Wisconsin. I am going to go with Iowa, and for one big reason, because I don't think I love Luke Fickell. I think Luke Fickell being hired at Wisconsin is a good thing. He brings Longo, great thing.
Yeah.
However, they want to go air raid. And I don't know if anyone here knows what Wisconsin's about. It is the exact opposite. This could be
ground and pound. Yeah. Yeah.
This could either get him fired or get him to like a playoff. Like
that's get him fired. Wow, that's
because
strong words.
If you got to think, if your identity is tough, ground and pound, big offensive lineman, and you're going to completely change that identity, and it doesn't go well, you have people that are going to be
how many years?
How
many years do you give them? How many years do you give them?
I'd say by about the fourth year is when you know what you got. So I'll give him till 3 or 4 to get his guys. You know, we always talk about that. Get his guys up into the upperclassman status, and then after that, you just kind of know. But I would say because it's going to be the first year, and they do have an all Big Ten running back. He'll probably be one of the best running backs in the nation, and Braylon Allen. Like, they do have good players, but their offensive line, just for an example, are big, lumpy guys that aren't speed and space. So if they're going to bring speed and space to the offense, I just think it's going to take a bit of time. They do have a great transfer quarterback, the dude from SMU. I forgot what his name is. Mordecai. Yeah, Mordecai.
Yep.
So don't get me wrong. I think they're going to have talent.
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. But Jim Leonard, also one of the best defensive coordinators. They let him go. I think this is primed for them to take a bit of a rebuild step back, just because of the drastic changes.
Yeah. But when you have, Tanner Mordecai, right, coming in, and you have 4 big wide receivers transferring in, you have, Braylon Allen and Maluzzi are the running backs, 4 of the returning offensive linemen. Like, that's a pretty good team. Now, to your point, as I was looking through, because I was also looking at their schedule, they're at Washington State in week 2 and at Purdue in week 4, and just at Purdue at the end of September. Like, that's all the makings of an upset. And then going to Washington State, as we know, is a tough place to play. Like, I'm not saying that they're going to lose those games, but like, that's not great places to play for a team who's like changing things so drastically with Wisconsin. And then for Iowa, though, like, I mean, what's compelling you there? Like, I agree that, like, is it McNamara? Is like that the big thing? Like, because like there's nothing that their offense does that makes me think that they're going to be able to keep, like, if Fickell's even somewhat able to get his offense into place, like, there's nothing Iowa can do to keep up with that.
I would argue that because you bet one of those games last year. Remind us what you bet on.
Oh, the Iowa game,
Yes.
my famous under,
Yeah.
where I bet under 15 in the third quarter, and it
Yeah.
ended like what 12 or 9-3 or something like that. Yeah, that
Yes.
was one of my favorite bets of all time.
So I just think when it comes down to um when it comes down to Iowa, I think their defense is going to be elite again. I think while they do have some guys that have gone to the NFL draft, they replenish them. They have two secondary members that are the new pick six crew that are going to score points on defense again. So I just think that their defense is going to be elite again, which it was elite. The problem was the offense. And I truly think that McNamara and Eric all joining that team, while again, there's not anything sexy about their wide receivers, nothing sexy about their running backs, but one thing Ferentz knows, and it was a bunch of young kids. So here, let me go through this. So they put, this is never a good thing, but they did put into Ferentz's son, who's the offensive coordinator, they put a clause in his contract that they have to score at least 21 points a game or he gets fired after this season ends.
Oh,
so they're done messing around when it comes to like being putrid on offense.
yeah.
I think Cade McNamara is really underrated, and the fact that they're going to ask him to do the exact same thing he did at Michigan, which is just hand the ball off in hard play action, perfect for him. And then they have, it's tight end not only is Eric All a really good tight end from Michigan, but and obviously someone Cade's familiar with, but they also have other tight ends because that's just what they are. And they bring back 4 offensive line starters who weren't very good last year, but they were really young. And I believe that out of all the things that Ferentz has done over the years, he knows offensive linemen. He gets those guys going. They have someone drafted every season. So I think that'll be much better. So I think the offense will be still not, I think the offense will go from horrid to like maybe a slightly below average. And I think because the defense will be elite, and really because Wisconsin's going through just drastic changes and have to play Ohio State, I just think they're going to get barely the leg up. I think this is going to be close. I'm not saying Iowa's going to like threaten to win the Big Ten. But the West sucks, and I think they're the best of that suckiness.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the Big Ten West, like the other teams that are in there, like, Illinois is returning a strong defense under Brett Bielema.
Lost a lot though. That's a problem. They lost a lot.
Minnesota defense is always so, like, the Big Ten West just has good defense. Like Minnesota, another good defense. Like, obviously they have some they're replacing some long time, like losing Ibrahim to the NFL, or like that's a big piece of their offense that they're missing. Huge. But they always have good defenses. So I think I'm taking Wisconsin in the West. Like okay. I think that just when you look at the excitement around Fickle and the things that like him and Longo want to do, bring in Tanner Mordecai, like I just think that they can get it going early, that they're going to be a pretty strong team. But they got to have a quick start out of the gate. They got to make sure that they don't get tripped up by, Washington State and Purdue. I do think that they'll probably lose to Ohio State, obviously in October. But like, I don't know. Like Iowa, not threatened by them. So, but I can see your points, especially around like Cade getting to do the same thing. So
yeah, he won't be asked to do to be, anything more than what he is. And he is a very accurate, short to mid-range thrower. And that's going to be fine for them. Yeah. I really think it is. And that was good enough for them to win last year, to get the Big Ten championship and get embarrassed. So I think it'll be good enough this year too.
Okay.
So the Big Ten East, I still think, unfortunately, this is Michigan's side and conference really to lose. I feel probably the best. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of them, better than most of the schools across all the conferences, because they're one of the few schools across conferences that are returning their quarterback, and that's a big deal. So you have JJ McSwizzle that comes back. The offensive line was really good, lost a couple guys, but brought in some of the best offensive line transfers. So I think they're just going to do the same thing. They bring back both Corum and Edwards.
That's huge. I think Corum coming back is much more important than JJ. Not that maybe not much more important, but like it is of utmost importance that Blake Corum is back. Like that's incredible. So
because he just complements Edwards so well. Well, Edwards is rightfully so was a 5-star and has proven that he's more of your space guy, right? Like he's your catch guy, get him out to the sidelines, and he's just blazing fast. And Corum's we need a yard, get us a yard. I mean, he's more than that, but he is that to that offense. So having them back, the wide receivers and tight ends are just okay, but again, the offense doesn't need them to be anything more than that because they're just going to completely wear down their opponents. And then on defense, they bring 9 of 11 starters back. And while they didn't have necessarily too many stars like Hutchinson, they were a very good team defense. And
the no-name defense, but like they got guys that are stepping up now.
For sure.
Junior Colson, Michael Barrett, like they got guys, they got some ball players now. They're turning from the no-name defense into like some star power.
Yeah. And I think especially on their secondary, I think their secondary is going to be very, very good again. I think the biggest question mark for them is their pass rush. I think their run defense is going to be great. It's going to be pass rush. And I don't think that's really going to come into question until the potential playoff matchup, right? I think they'll be able to get through the Big Ten just fine with what they have on defense, but there's definitely a couple more question marks. But like I said, mainly that pass rush, but I think it's still gonna be a very good team all around. And I will say there is only one team that I think can trip them up and actually potentially make a splash, and I think it's Penn State this year and not Ohio State. And so I know you had been talking about Ohio State, and maybe we're both in sync, but I think Penn State is scary, and I really think there's a very plausible situation where you have Michigan lose in Happy Valley, Ohio State lose in Ann Arbor, and then Penn State lose in Columbus, and it could be a 3-way round robin. Unfortunately, Penn State has to play Northwestern this year, and that's going to keep them out of that conversation in a 3-way tie. But I mean, Penn State, so you have great offensive line, and they just want to move you out of the way. They have I forgot what the kid's name is that I can't pronounce, the left tackle that's going to be most likely the first left tackle off the board, top 5 pick. Could have been that last year, decided to come back for one more year. You had Singleton was an all Big Ten player as a true freshman. He comes back along with, I forgot who their backup is, but he's also a very good back. So I think that they are just going to.
Olufashanu is the offensive tackle. Yep.
So I just think that offense is going to want to ram it down. It's going to be very similar to Michigan. The difference is we know what JJ McCarthy is, and we don't know what Drew Aller is. So I know he's a 5-star kid, but he's never played a college football in a meaningful way. So I think that's the biggest question mark, because on defense, they brought in Manny Diaz, and they had the best defense in the Big Ten, and they reloaded. They're going to have a lot of those guys back, and the players that they missed, they replaced pretty well. So I think, and Michigan's only won 2 out of the last 7 that they've played in Happy Valley. Why Penn State decided that this was not going to be their whiteout is beyond me, because that would have been really a nail, I feel like, in Michigan's coffin potentially. But I really love Penn State here. The biggest question mark is Drew Aller. If he ends up being what they think he's going to be, I think they very well could beat Michigan and could get into the playoff. But I think because I don't know, I'm going to put them that peg below. Sorry. So what are your thoughts on?
No, I went back and forth on this a lot. On Penn State and Ohio State, right? Because like the biggest thing with Penn State is like with Aller, who had some good starts, Singleton and Katron Allen run the ball, like, and a really strong defense. Like they do look very, very strong for this year. The biggest thing that I look at is like Ohio State, right? And it's like, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt, just because like they just reload, like guys who are somewhat no names, like just can come in and get it done. Like you got like the offensive line, you need to reload there. You have Kyle McCord and Devin Brown are fighting out for the quarterback battle, but then like who are they throwing to? Like Marvin Harrison, Emeka Ibuka, and Julian Fleming. That's the best trio since Judy Smith, and Ruggs, and Jalen Waddle. That was technically a foursome, but those three guys were the same year. So it's like, like it's an incredible team. Travion Henderson, Tommy Eichenberg is like the perfect name for a tight end in the Big East, right? So it's like, yeah, I agree. Michigan's definitely number one. I've gone back and forth a lot on Ohio State and Penn State, and like I think you're talking me into Penn State getting it done, because this is definitely James Franklin's most talented team, and just like I said, like Ohio State just has more holes to fill than Penn State does. I think Penn State's returning just a stronger class this year. I do think that it's going to be, it's good. I would love to see that. Like, I would love to see Penn State get a win against one of those two teams, Michigan, Ohio State. And, we have some drama going into the game at the end of the season. So,
yeah. So, and this kind of couples with like my disappointment. I think Ohio State is my disappointment. Again, relative term, because they went to the playoff last year. Many, they were a play away from the national championship and arguably probably would have won it had they played TCU, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, again, so they're replacing CJ Stroud, which is a big deal. And McCord is a 5-star kid. Don't get me wrong. It's not like they're replacing, him with scrubs, but until I see him play a football game, I can't trust that.
Yeah.
So I think they're in a very similar spot as Penn State. The difference is Michigan is broken Ohio State, right?
Yeah.
The last 2 years, they just aren't tough enough on both sides of the ball to be able to handle that. And I think I don't think they changed that this year. So I think they lost the few good offensive linemen they had. They lost, and then the defensive line as well. Like, I don't think they did anything that made them tougher up front on either side. Not to say they're going to be terrible, don't get me wrong, but if I'm putting
they're just
going
to get the crap kicked out of them by Michigan again.
And unfortunately, Penn State has a very similar recipe, and I'm going to give them, I think they're going to definitely lose in Ann Arbor, and I think Penn State, who has always played Ohio State tough, even in Columbus, I think Penn State has the right recipe on offense and defense.
Penn State had them last year. They had them dead to rights last year. So this could be the year if they get it done.
So I really do think Ohio State can lose those two. And honestly, they also play Notre Dame in South Bend early in the year. And Notre Dame, while I don't think they're super talented, they play the same way. They have one of the best offensive lines. They're going to run it down your throat. Sam Hartman is there. Now they don't really have anything to throw to, but he's still there, and that's a better quarterback than they've had in years. And Marcus Freeman with that defense is going to have them. And apparently reports out of South Bend has been that they are just physical. And the one thing Ohio State hasn't been, while they're prepared to be able to play teams that are speed and space, they've struggled with teams that want to punch them in the face.
They've built themselves to beat the SEC.
Yes.
Like, that's what Ohio State has done. They've built themselves to beat the SEC, which is interesting.
And Michigan has built themselves to beat Ohio State, but not the SEC.
Yes. Yeah. Well, but I think there's also a bit of a changing of philosophies in the SEC. So a little bit of a prelude. I think that there's going to be football cyclical sometimes. Everything comes back around. I think that we're seeing some things come back around a little bit. I think that there's a lot more emphasis on physical football. But yeah, so I agree. Like, I think they're going to get bullied a little bit this year, and they have a chance to lose some games. So, all right. So then I'm Michigan over Wisconsin, and you're Michigan over Iowa.
Yep.
So pretty chalky for me. Very chalky for me, not as chalky for you. Although now we get to a interesting conference where I'm interested to hear your feedback on this one. I had a hard time too, because like when you look at the Big 12, well, anything else on the Big 10 before we jump off of it?
Nope.
All right. So when we look at the Big 12, like, there's a lot of turnover this year in the Big 12.
Just do it.
Hook 'em, baby.
I
mean, there's no doubt for me that like Sark has to get it done this year. Like, he knows he has to get it done this year. Has to win the conference this year. I think Quinn Ewers hope to God can take a step forward in his sophomore year. If he doesn't, they're screwed. Like that's the biggest question mark. But
he cut his hair. He's ready.
I hope he is. But the O-line's back and the O-line's deep, which is extremely important. Jonathan Brooks, you got CJ Baxter, who's the number 1 running back in the 2023 class. You got Xavier Worthy, Jordan Wington, Jatavion Sanders, their tight end is a stud. They brought in A.D. Mitchell from Georgia. And whenever I was looking through this, I was like, A.D. Mitchell, that sounds very familiar. He's the guy that caught the touchdown for the win against Alabama in 2021. So that's why that name popped out for me. And then, they got 6 defensive starters returning. So, I mean, Texas, like I see them, I think that the Big 12 is going to be pretty competitive because I think that you have a lot of teams, like even though TCU has a lot of talent to replace, like the defense is returning is pretty strong. Texas Tech, man, like I forgot all about their bowl win against Ole Miss. Like they had a pretty sneaky year last year. I think they could be a dark horse. And, they had a Shoe was coming back from an injury for them and had like a late season surge. I forgot their head coach. He was the Cedar Hill high school coach. And then he, came straight from Cedar Hill to coaching Texas Tech. Like, I think they could be a real dark horse here in the Big 12. I do think though that when it came to like who's going to be the runner up in the conference, I was back and forth. You have 2 teams with a quarterback battle going on. You have 2 teams that have, some good offensive offensive people returning, but doing a bit of a rebuild on defense. But at the end, one of those teams had a much better recruiting class and transfer class, and that team was Oklahoma. I think Kansas State is someone who I thought could finish in second place, but ultimately, I think Oklahoma just with their better recruiting class, better transfer class, they're going to get it done, but just not enough to take down Texas. Now, do I think Texas is going to go to the playoff? Maybe that's a conversation for a later time. But Texas they seem like the ones to get it done in the Big 12 this year. But second place was tough for me. I will say Texas Tech is sneaky. I keep looking at them, thinking, what are they going to do this year? So, but I think it's going to be Texas over Oklahoma. I think it's going to be the Red River shootout again for the Big 12 championship game, and Texas is going to come on top both times. So, hook 'em, baby.
This was far easier for me than you.
Oh, you weren't pained at all.
No. This is horns up. Get them up. We're going.
Hook 'em.
This team. Oh, okay. So I will just kind of reiterate, go through kind of what you laid out here. Ewers in his second year. The biggest games they lost last year was because he was hurt. It wasn't when he had either was knocked out of a game or played poorly. It was because he wasn't healthy. And while I know everyone's itching for Arch and he is probably going to be very special, but it seems very clear it's not there yet.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if Ewers got hurt, if he could step in. It sounded like he was getting better and better. Had like a 70-yard run. Apparently Arch has the wheels that Eli and Peyton don't have, apparently. But yeah, so this was already Ewers in his second year in his system. So that's a big thing for him. The only 2 players they lost on offense was Bijan and Johnson. And like you had already said, they replaced them. They returned all 5 starters on the offensive line, which played 2 true freshmen who held their own. So they're going to make a jump. And then they have the explosive skill players to be able to score on offense. And on defense, they're actually one of only 5 teams to place in the top 10 in both explosive rushing D and explosive passing D. And it returned 6 starters. And they did lose a couple D linemen, but they replaced them with seasoned, like 4th or 5th year players that were former 5-star, former 4-stars. They returned a really good secondary and added all SEC freshmen stolen from Arkansas and Jalen Catalone. So I'm going to say it. Texas is back. And not only do I think they're back, I'm sorry, Mike, but I think week 2, Tuscaloosa, they're
Oh,
coming out. They're coming out with the dub. I mean,
I don't know
if two
about that.
quarterbacks don't die, they beat them pretty handily in
Yeah,
Boston. I'm just gonna we'll get to the SEC because I think that's where we're really gonna differ on our viewpoints. But I'm putting the flag in the middle of the field.
I
I am
can't.
gonna die on this hill. Texas is going undefeated. They will be in the playoff.
Oh,
Texas
wow.
13-0. I mean, if you want me to give
Wow.
you the second place, it's meaningless. I don't believe in Venables, to be honest with you. I think Oklahoma, while they did do a lot of transfer stuff, I don't know if that dude's the dude. I know
Yeah.
Gabriel's fun. I'm hitching my horse in second place to Kansas State for a few reasons. So they kept Colin Klein, which was a big deal because there was a lot of teams snaking him. He was the offense coordinator, former Heisman candidate, believe it or not, if it was so long ago with Manti Te'o. He was in that one with Manziel, Te'o, and Klein. But they bring Will Howard back as the quarterback. So again, I love that they have their quarterback. I know that he was the backup, but he played a lot because Kansas State's quarterbacks just died
Yeah.
every time we bet
You
them.
killed them. You killed them.
Yes, and they have all 5 offensive linemen back, and that offensive line was the 5th best rushing attack in all of college football. They do need to replace Deuce Vaughn, my boy Deuce, and their explosive slot receiver and Knowles. So that's the biggest questions. But because they already have the offensive line, I feel comfortable that they can probably slot in a running back and be okay there. Will Howard has the experience. He also has some wheels. They did bring in a couple of transfer receivers from Florida State, one from Iowa, believe it or not, the only real good Iowa receiver left. And then they have a tight end they call Mini Gronk, and they're hoping that he can take the next step forward there on offense. I think that offense, I feel great. The biggest problem for Kansas State with me is the defense. That's where they lost a lot of pieces, but they do have they have a lot of attrition on the defensive line, but they did keep a lot of their secondary. The thing is, their linebacking core is probably going to be one of the best in the nation. Believe it or not, it's pretty crazy. But
Oh, yeah.
I think that they I think one of the other big things here is why I really have them slotted is their schedule. So let me go through this and you tell me where you think a loss is. So you have Southeast Missouri, no win. Troy, win. At Missouri, likely win. I think Missouri will be a little better, but still probably
Yeah.
not there.
Yeah.
UCF, but it's at home. I think that's pretty
Yeah.
good win. I think Oklahoma State's going to stink. At Texas Tech is one. I'm with you with them. That's one that I think could be a loss. I think TCU has too much to replenish.
Replace. Yeah.
Then Houston, I don't think they're going to be very good. At Texas, loss. Baylor, I don't think is going to be as good.
No.
At Kansas, maybe. And then Iowa
No.
State stinks. So this is they avoid Oklahoma. And they really the hardest road games they have at Texas Tech, even if you take those 2 losses into account, I still think they'll be second and sneak in, but I think it'll be close. I do think it's not like a clear runaway second, but I'm strongly on the Texas bandwagon here. I know it's one of those teams where you can't trust them, and I know I'm going to get hurt. But this team is so goddamn talented, and they showed enough last year for me and are returning enough for me to just go on. So, my dark horse.
I love it. I love it. I love it, by the way. Hook 'em.
And I'll go Texas Tech. I'm with you there. I think they had a really great finish to the end of the year. Found their quarterback. The offensive coordinator Zach Kitley came from Western Kentucky, and he's doing a whole new type of air raid. And so I think him being in the second year there is going to be big. The star sophomore Morton. It'll be interesting to see between him and was it Shao but they at least have a 2-headed horse, and they have that talented kid that did get to play. So he got some time. They return all of the receivers. and they even got a couple more offensive linemen that better fit their air raid system. So it'll be interesting to see if they're any good, but at least they came from Western Kentucky and other places that do air raids, so they should be in a better fit. And then the defense returns. They have a really weird defense at 2-4-5, and they return at least to two big boys up front. Obviously hard to replace Tyree Wilson, who was a top 10 pick, but they do have another kid, Miles Cole, that's drawing a lot of attention on the edge. And really, again, like, their schedule is not bad. They only go to Texas. They're really riding high. They get Oregon, which I actually think Oregon might lose early in Lubbock to them. So I think this is the team. I think they have the best. I don't think they're good enough to beat Texas for like the conference, but I could definitely see them, if things really break the right way. I think they could be that second team that could potentially beat Texas. Don't get me wrong, but I think they have a chance to be that thorn in those team sides. So I'm with you there.
All right. Well, then this brings us to the Pac-12, which I am extremely excited. You're converting to the Pac-12.
Yeah.
You're going to go to the woods. For those who listened to our last episode, EJ's a staunch Pac-12 supporter, now Pac-4 supporter. He's going to move to the woods up in Oregon and in Michigan. He's going to join one of those crazy cults out there, maybe start his own, and just spread the gospel of Gardner Minshew and just all the good things that Washington State and Oregon State have to offer. So who are you picking this year in the Pac-12?
So this was tough. This was a tough conference for me because I really don't believe in USC at all. So
that's crazy.
I think these teams are going to cannibalize each other, unfortunately, all these schools. So I have a pretty clear winner of the conference. It was really hard to play that schedule game to figure out who's going to lose in the Pac-12 championship.
Why don't you believe in USC?
Because let me bring in up right now. So Caleb Williams is awesome. No doubt there. Lincoln Riley's awesome. And while they lose Jordan Addison, they're going to find skilled players. That's not the problem. The problem is they had an offensive line that was 55th out of 69 Power 5 in sack rate, with Caleb Williams, who is the most elusive quarterback in all of college football.
Yep.
And they lost 3 of those offensive linemen. So that's tough.
It's a tough look. It's a tough look.
And their defense was horrific. And I know that's where they put all of their transfer energy into it, but that's a lot to ask. And trust me, I'm a Spartans fan. I know all about this transfer portal stuff and how fun it is to hear you got this former 4-star from an SEC school or XYZ.
Hell yeah, brother.
I just think because the other teams, this is the conference that has all of the returning quarterbacks, all of the veteran returning quarterbacks. I don't think that defense is going to be primed, and the teams they struggled with crammed the ball down their throats. And I think they play enough of those teams again that could trip them up. So I think, for instance, they play at Notre Dame. I think the way Notre Dame plays, while USC is going to be more talented, that could be trouble. At Oregon's going to be trouble for them. And then you have Utah's going to punch you in the face. And believe it or not, Chip Kelly's UCLA Bruins, those guys run the ball and power running. And I think these power running teams are going to wear USC down. So I actually have them as my disappointment, again, relative.
I was going to say, are they even making it to Vegas in your book?
No, they are not. So
wait, hold on. Cliff Kingsbury is now on the staff too with Lincoln Riley. You've got Mario Williams, Taj Washington, Brendan Rice. They got Dorian Singer from Arizona, and they got the number 1 overall wide receiver in the class, Zachariah Brown. You don't think that offense is going to just light it? I get it. With the offensive line, they suck. They're terrible. What?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading. I'm reading.
Okay, I thought you were getting ready to make a big point there.
No, I get it, but what part of that offense wasn't good last year? And where did that get them? So that's why I just don't understand. Like you're putting a lot of faith that the defense will be okay, right? And that's the difference from last year.
Yeah.
Last year's offense was spectacular. Like they had the Blitnikoff, a Blitnikoff winner on the team. So it's not the offense. The offense will be fine. I just I get really worried for Caleb Williams and that offensive line. Like I mean,
Yeah.
he died last year and that killed their season. I
Yeah.
don't see where that's going to be any different this year. And I don't necessarily, based on these other teams in the conference, I don't think they have done like I haven't seen their defense. There's other teams that I at least know what I'm getting. And I'm sorry. Like I also, again, like I'm more of like a Drake May might be the first overall pick. I'm not just penciling in Caleb Williams to be the next Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and you're right with Cliff Kingsbury, but also like how much more is he going to add to the room than Lincoln Riley? I mean, Lincoln Riley's already, at the top of that game. So all that to say, Washington is who I think is going to win the Pac-12. I think it was an awesome year for them last year. I've always loved Kellen DeBoer, and this is now year 2 for them. Penix Jr., because they will play, he was their offensive coordinator in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Penix literally said when he first announced his transfer, teammates that were already at Washington were asking him about the offensive playbook, and he hadn't even seen it yet because it was just going to be the same exact thing he had at Indiana, maybe some verbiage changes, and it showed. So I think he's going to be a very serious Heisman contender. The OC last year was a semifinalist for the Art Broyles Award. They bring back a Dunzy, who's going to probably be a first-round pick in the receiver, and McMillan also returns, and he was one of their leading receivers as well. They lost their leading rusher, but they have quite a few stable to replace him, and the offensive line was one of the best. But they do lose their 3 interior guys. It's good that they kept their tackles, so that's the big thing. But the replacements for their 3 offensive linemen are all 5th-year guys, and they were all blue chip prospects at one point. So you have a potential for that offense to be honestly as dynamic as USC with maybe a little bit more balance because the offensive line's better. So on defense, they weren't very good against the pass last year, but it is the second year in their system, which I believe in that. And they got a few transfers to play corner, but they do have a really, really, really talented front 7. So that's kind of where I'm hitching in. So I think they're going to stop the run. I think they're going to their offense is going to score a lot of points. And I just think if you're looking at like a conference that has a lot of good offensive teams, but bad defensive, I think they're the defense that's primed to be the best of them. And I really think there's already some like all American prospects on defense, mainly in the front 7, all conference teams. So I think all of that taken into account, I think they're the best. I think they have a pretty favorable schedule in that most of the big games come to them. Yeah,
I'm looking at it right now. I mean, they have to go to USC,
but that's not
Oregon State
a tough place.
Yeah.
So like USC is not like a home field advantage, right? Like people don't show up to those games. Like, sure, it could be. I guess not could be hot in November, but yeah. So going to USC isn't the same as going to like Eugene. I think going to Eugene is or to Salt Lake is a lot harder to play than going to the Coliseum. So I'm a big Washington fan. We'll see. Obviously, they played Spartans pretty early on, which shouldn't give them any problems, unfortunately. But I really think they're in a. I will say I think the top 4 teams are very close. I don't think in my eyes, I don't think there's anything like huge between them. I just think it's scheduling and just a little bits and pieces here. So. I think offense, like I said, I think Washington's offense is going to be one of the best, including against USC. I just think their defense is going to also be pretty good.
So Washington's your conference champ.
Yeah.
Who is your runner-up in the conference?
This is where we get hard here.
We're getting a little wild.
Yeah, this is going to be the wildest thing I do. And some of it is with my heart, and I don't care. That's fine. I'll lose a point to you. I don't care. I'm going with with the Beavs. I'm going with the Beavers. I'm going Oregon State. I think.
Okay.
So I already told you how I feel about USC.
Okay.
I think Oregon is road Bo Nix, and so I was counting the losses on the road for Bo Nix and that team, as well as they have to replace one coordinator, their offensive coordinator. They lost a bunch on defense as well. I think Oregon was one that I wanted to put in there. I think that Utah was very close for me. I love Cam Rising. I think their defense, that's where I think USC is going to have some trouble, because you have teams like UCLA, you have teams like Oregon State, you have teams like Washington, even Oregon, and definitely Utah, where they beat you up. And I don't think USC has the team like last year to handle that through 5 games, right? Like if they only played one team that had to do that, that's fine. They got 5. So I think that's tough. But okay, so here's the case for Oregon State. Let me try and make this case. So Jonathan Smith, their head coach, did a hell of a job last year. Everyone loved to watch them play. Their offensive line was the strength of the team, arguably one of the best in the nation, and this version of the offensive line is heralded as the best in school history. So if they already had a great offensive line last year, they're really looking into it this year. They have a 4-headed RB monster led by Damian Martinez. So they return basically the run games back. The problem was their quarterback was horrific. I mean, at one point, I think they only let him throw like 10 passes in one of the games. Like, it was bad. And while everyone has a feeling about DJU, I really think he has a chance to have maybe not as good of a Bo Nix-esque season in his first year in Oregon, but I think getting away from Clemson, getting away from the limelight, I think
from the Dr. Pepper sponsorships. Yeah. Right.
I think being asked to hand the ball off and do play action is going to do wonders for him. And a lot of talk out of camp, again, I know it's college football, so you have to be really careful with some of that stuff. But a lot of the beat writers were saying he looked head and shoulders better than Gulbranson last year, which isn't saying much, but he just looked comfortable. And I think they're not going to ask him to do a ton, and he's big and can run. So I think that's even going to be a plus on the run game too. Don't have much at the receivers, but they didn't have it much at the receivers last year, and that didn't hurt them. And believe it or not, their tight end room is still pretty strong, even after losing Luke Musgrave, who was a top pick, went to the Packers. But they do have a couple other tight ends to replace him. So I think that offense is going to kind of be similar to what it was. I think it's actually going to be better than what it was last year. The big problem here, truthfully, is defense. While the defense was really awesome last year, they did lose a lot. And that's the biggest question mark for me. So they have a young secondary, pretty much a brand new linebacking core, because LSU stole their star linebacker, Spates. I think he went to LSU. One of them transferred out, or maybe Georgia. I can't remember. But the defensive line is a known commodity, so I feel good about that. It's just the linebacking core, the secondary is a little bit sketchy. But what I will say is they have an offense that teams don't want to deal with, and 3 of their 4 toughest games are at home. So that is why I am putting them there. And also, to be honest with you, I know this sounds silly, I think there's going to be a big disrespect factor this year. I think this whole Pac-12 imploding, the fact that they're left behind, and this Jonathan Smith, the way they want to play, I think they are going to feel really disrespected, similar with Utah. Utah's back-to-back champions, and they're not even in most places put to even return to the championship game, let alone beat USC. I think there's going to be a big disrespect factor that, again, I don't know, but that's what I'm going with. I can honestly admit I feel good about Washington. I honestly admit Oregon State's a bit of a stretch. Don't get me wrong, but I do think the way they play, the toughness that they play, they had a great year last year. I have them in Vegas losing to Washington.
Okay. So we have agreed on all of our conference champions up to this point. We both had Florida State over Clemson in the ACC. We both had Michigan, different teams in the West, but we both had Texas. This is where we part ways. with both of our teams, they're going to be in the Pac-12 championship game. So I am, though. I mean, you made a very, very compelling. I have to like bring myself back around because you made a very compelling point about Washington. I don't think that they're going to make it to the conference championship game. I agree. Like it is a 4-horse team, like four-horse race. Like whenever it comes to I think USC, Washington, Utah, Oregon, like they're all very strong, returning starting quarterbacks. Like they are gonna, be great teams, right? I definitely think that they're gonna beat each other up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, I love USC. I think that like I said, with Cliff Kingsbury coming in, like I just think that like. Yeah, it's a problem with the offensive line. And yeah, you got to like trust those transfers that are coming in for the portal to make a difference. I just think there's too much talent on offense for them to not get to Vegas. But I do see them losing to Utah. I think Utah gets the three-peat. Like this is a super veteran team. Like I for sure thought Cam Rising was done. Like he's 57 years old. Like there's no way that he should still be playing college football, but he is. Their tight end, Brant Kuth, is back. They have 11 of their top 15 defenders coming back, and it's just a super, super senior team. Like that team has been there for a long time. There's not very much attrition at all. The only thing is that one of the biggest things about Utah, one of their biggest advantages is Rice-Eccles Stadium. They're on the road against Oregon State, USC, Washington, they're on the road against Oregon State. They're on the road against USC, and then they are on the road against Washington. And then their last game of the season, they host Colorado at home, which I think Deion Sanders is going to have the Buffs pretty pumped up for that game. So, like, I do see a lot of trouble spots in their schedule, but I just think that, like, even, like, going on the road for those games, like, having such a veteran team, that's going to win out at the end of the day. Like these are guys who have been there, have seen it, and know how to overcome it. So that's why I think Utah is going to win. And I think that there's just way too much talent on the USC offense for them to not get to Vegas.
No, I'm with you. Utah was my dark horse, if you want to call them that. My hesitation with them was Cam Rising's hurt. So how quickly can he be healthy? And they have a horrible non-conference. Don't get me wrong. Florida is not going to be too good, but that's still an SEC school coming to your town. And while Baylor's not as good as probably they were last year, going to Waco is a pain in the ass. Like that AD needs to get fired to put both of those, like maybe once the 12-team playoff is here, but they really put them in a tough spot to make a playoff. Sure. But I'm nervous they might be a little worn down. So if you go Florida at Baylor, UCLA, who's going to want to push you hard, even though that's what Utah does, at Oregon State, like not to say they're going to lose all those games, but I feel like physically that could be a problem. But I agree with you. This is Utah easily. Like I said, they were my dark horse. They were the one I was having a hard time keeping out of the conference championship. I just a three-peat, that's hard to do. That's really hard to do. So that was my only hesitation with them. But I could easily see Washington, Utah, and I could easily see Utah going all the way. Like I don't think you're off at all there. And then like I said, my disappointment just because they have to play some physical teams is USC. And maybe the defense fixes itself, and if they do, watch out, right? Like clearly watch out. But I just think they might be a year away from him really trying to figure out that defense. But no, great. This is great. This is going to mean this is going to be like the win or loss for us, right? Like this is a very clearly going to define. And the thing is, we could both be wrong. This could easily be. I mean, it's Oregon.
It could be Oregon. It could be USC. Hell, it could be Oregon State. Like I like the revenge tour thing for Oregon State for sure this year. I do.
Yeah.
All right.
All I can tell you is I'm going to watch as many Pac-12 games as possible. I'm in, and
hell yeah, brother.
I'm really sad that this is going to be the last time for like the Apple Cup for a while, the Civil War. I
thought they said they're playing the Apple Cup every year.
I think Washington said they would continue to honor that, but I think Washington State was like, you can go F yourself. We'll talk about it later. And same with Oregon was like, oh, don't worry, we're going to keep our tradition with Oregon State, and Oregon State was like, we'll see about that. So
yeah.
I think they will. Both teams, I think both
Yeah.
rivalries will stay, but I could see them maybe taking a year off just as like a middle finger to the two
Yeah.
teams leaving.
Yeah.
But I hope not, because I
Yeah.
enjoy those.
All right. Well, here we go into the SEC.
I mean, we could just start with the East. Why don't we just
Yeah.
get that out of the way?
Georgia.
Yeah.
Georgia, right? We're both Georgia.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
no way to keep them out of there, because they literally do not play a soul until the second to last season, or last game of the season at Tennessee. And unfortunately, like I'm rooting for Hempel, is how you say it? Heupel. I'm really rooting for Heupel. I hope that they
makes
have
one of us.
Well, I know you don't. I get it. They're a rival, but I from the seeing new faces, emerge out of these conferences, I hope for their sake that they're at least respectable and they don't have a huge off the cliff nosedive after finally coming to relevance for the first time since like Peyton Manning. But I have to believe it when I see it. So Georgia literally does not have to get out of bed until then, and even that is questionable, getting out of bed. So yeah, I mean, we can go through a little bit later what they've lost, which is a lot. But obviously they're always in a position to reload. But I really question how quickly someone's going to replace Stetson Bennett. I think even though he's 40 years old and isn't a very good pro prospect, he was one of the best college football quarterbacks, right? Like by that definition, and obviously very, very old and inexperienced. So I think that's going to be harder to replace, even though they're going to replace him with, they have the trio of, big name guys behind him. But yeah, I think Georgia's in Atlanta, right? Atlanta.
Yeah.
Going to Atlanta.
I mean, I think for sure, like, there's just no way there's no one stopping them. Like the way that they're just able to reload is insane. And I don't think that, having to replace Stetson Bennett, like that was a great Cinderella story, but I think that they're better. It's addition by subtraction. I think that they are better off without him.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I do. Now when it comes to the West, I gotta go with my heart here. I gotta pick Bama. Like, and I have reasons, right? So on offense, I know you're losing Bryce Young, right? And the thing is that everyone that they've lost, like they're in such a position to be such a dangerous team this year. Because it's like you look at, okay, they lost Bryce Young, they lost Jahmyr Gibbs. Last year they didn't have any like standout wide receivers, and those guys are all coming back, but like there's no Waddle, there's no Jerry Jeudy, there's no Devonta Smith hanging out, right?
Julio.
There's no Julio, there's no Calvin Ridley. When you look at defense, thank God Pete Golding's gone. I'll just say that again, addition by subtraction. Pete Golding's gone, going to Ole Miss. And again, have to replace a lot of guys, have to replace Henry Toto, have to replace Will Anderson. Kool-Aid McKinstry is like the only guy that's really coming back. Well, Dallas Turner too.
I was gonna say, Turner.
Yeah. But I think he's gonna be an absolute stud. But I think that this is just like, these are the types of seasons where Nick Saban reminds you exactly why he's Nick Saban. Last year, I think the past couple of years have been disappointing for him. I feel like he's probably pretty pissed off and motivated. I think that with Steele coming in on defense, I think Saban's going to take a much more invested role in the defense, which is always a good thing. I also think that their new offensive coordinator is going to come in. I think that Saban is tired of not being able to run the ball. Like that's something that he's always wanted to do. He got away from that in order to beat Clemson and in order to beat, these teams that were, that were going with this hurry up tempo type of offense. I think now he's just like, all right, you know what? We're just going to get back to what I know. We're going to punish guys. So I think that there's a lot of, obviously with their great transfer classes and their great recruiting classes, like the talent is just there. I think the guys are going to step up. And I think that he is on a revenge tour this year. I think this is going to be your classic Saban revenge tour. And there's going to be a lot of future first round guys that are going to be coming out of the classes there at Bama right now. I know that there's a lot of good teams in the West this year, like that freak Brian Kelly who killed a kid. He's building something good at LSU. That class at A&M just has to get better. I mean, it was the best recruiting class of all time, and it has to improve. But that being said, I think that it still all comes back to this is Alabama's conference until someone else says otherwise. And I think that they are. This is not the Nick Saban that you want to play when they're like counting him out. Like when they're giving, he's the guy that has to like create rat poison and like create things to motivate his team. When David Pollock gets on national television and says Alabama is over, the conference runs through Athens, like that's all you need. Like that was all I needed to see last year to be like, okay, well, we'll see you in Atlanta then. So I think it's going to be Georgia and Alabama in Atlanta again. What's the outcome? I'll save that till you give your pick, but I think Alabama's coming out of the West.
Okay. Let me start off by saying everything I'm about to say is respectfully. Okay. Can I caveat respectfully ahead of time? I see Alabama's, and obviously that, and rightfully so, the conversation starts there. I think Alabama's going to have one of two seasons. What you described, revenge and potentially beating Georgia because they're literally going to not have to wake up until then. And I think that's going to actually be tough for them to do, especially replacing a lot of players. And it's not just, yeah, you get to replace these players. They are replacing like generational talent. Some very old guard, respectful captains, at these very important places. And while they are going to obviously benefit from having a joke of a conference like division, and are really going to just cruise to the championship game, I think that's actually going to be, I don't have them winning the conference. So I'll just tell you that. I don't think Georgia's going to win because I think the toughest game they're going to play is then. And unfortunately, they're going to play a team that's more battle tested by that point, and it's going to bite them in the butt. So it comes down to Alabama and LSU. And for a lot of the reasons you gave, I'm going to flip side it and caveat it with like, I really think it's either going to be Nick Saban returns or maybe Alabama doesn't win double-digit wins in the regular season for the first time in a decade. Like, I think it's going to be one of the two. And I'm going to deviate from you, and I'm going to go with the latter. So I think LSU returning again. I hate Brian Kelly. Everyone hates Brian Kelly. I think people in Louisiana hate Brian Kelly, but it's really hard to overlook what he's done. And they really return pretty much every position they had last year, which was good enough to get to the SEC championship in his first year. Obviously got killed by Georgia, but everyone got killed by Georgia. But they're returning everyone. And so they're either getting the same, staying the same, or getting better. So I really like Jaden Daniels coming back. He threw 17 touchdowns to only 3 picks. And you can argue those 3 picks really weren't his fault. They're bringing back their leading rushers. The whole line was young and just okay, but they returned 4 of them, and they got obviously very meaningful experience. So expect them to be at least a little better. They bring back all of the running backs from last year. And then they do have a great run at receiver, and they do lose Butte, even though he's a POS and arguably could be better without him. But they do add some very capable guys, and one of them was the only SEC receiver to eclipse 1,000 yards receiving, and Malik Neighbors. So, and Mason Taylor is one of the best tight ends that returned. So I think that's great. On defense, they had quietly one of the better defenses against the run last year. And they do lose Ojolari, but they also have Harold Perkins, who, took the league by storm as a true freshman. And so he's only going to get better. LSU was the one that returned added the 4-year starter from Oregon State, the middle linebacker Omar Speights, and then they got a couple of all ACC transfers in the secondary, and they returned their safety. So I just think that this team was a pretty good one, and well, like you said, they kind of dropped the one game at the very beginning of the year against Florida State. I don't see that happening this year. My hesitation is very simple. It's they have to go to Tuscaloosa. If this was in Death Valley, it would be a much different feel, but they're going to earn it. They go to Tuscaloosa, they're going to earn that. So I just, with Alabama, you don't know who the quarterback really is, right? You have Milroe didn't exactly inspire last year, and Buckner, whoever the hell he is from Notre Dame.
So you think LSU, after beating Alabama last year in a very narrow game, is going to go to Bryant-Denny Stadium and beat Alabama again?
I am, unlike Chad Ball, everyone saw what Bryce Young was. And
he's the only person, in all of history.
He's not coming back. And you said so yourself. They bringing back the very meh receiving core. I mean, sure, there's another year of experience and maybe someone steps up. Of course they can. I think that offense is going to struggle again. And while the defense is still going to be very good, like it always is, it was very good last year. And Bryce Young was very good last year and willed that team to some pretty spectacular close wins. Also close losses. It's not like they're getting blown out. I think because they have there's new coordinators. Now I know that's for you addition by subtraction, but that's still new things in the first year to do new things. So I think the coordinator turnover, the uncertainty at quarterback, and the lack of like NFL star level skill players is why I think LSU has some of that Alabama doesn't. But the equalizer is they have to go to Tuscaloosa. And I do think that's a tall order. And I think that's tough. But I have LSU going to the championship, and I have them beating Georgia. So I think LSU is going to be that SEC team that emerges, that, the once every, now it's been 5 years when it's not been Georgia or it's not been Alabama. I think LSU has the best chance to do this. I'll also caveat, like you said, Alabama, we both hate A&M, but like you said, they finally found their quarterback at the end of that year, and this is now the third year for that heralded class. So eventually the money's going to pay off. So I think they're going to be better, and Bama has to go to A&M. I mean, I know you're going to laugh here, but I think Kentucky's going to be
Kentucky's
better. They got their offensive coordinator that made Levis look good back in Cohen. They added Dennis Leary, who was very good at North Carolina State. And again, while I don't think Alabama's going to lose in Lexington, that's still a quality road game that they have to go to as well. But so it's tough for me. And Auburn, I think Auburn's going to be better, even though they're still a shit show, and you never know what those rivalries.
It's always a rivalry game, but
no, and I think they were terrible last year, and I think they're not going to be like good by.
They're going to be the bottom of the SEC West. They maybe like just maybe better than Vanderbilt, like in the SEC overall.
I will say Mississippi State makes me nervous, just unfortunately because Leach and the changing of the guard there. But you're right; they'll be there. They'll be fighting the Bulldogs for the bottom. So so then my dark horses. I mean, it's kind of hard to say a dark horse would be Bama, but like, that would be the next best. Like if Saban does go on this, and I love Nick Saban, obviously, with his Michigan State ties, and it's not me like trying to root against Bama. I think, but if you're right, if Saban is Saban, he will this team to there. So that's my biggest like hesitation is there. But I do think LSU has enough, and I do think they'll beat Florida State at the beginning, and then I do think they can beat Bama and Tuscaloosa to get there and then beat Georgia. So that's where I'm at. I know it's different. We'll see. Again, I feel like this is going to be one or the other, right? I feel like either Bama's going to be back, or, they're going to kind of, tread water again. But
I think Bama gets it done this year. I think that they go to the SEC championship game. So I had Georgia as the SEC champion, SEC champion, but like now I'm back and forth because you make some good points. And losing Todd Monken is like
huge. That's huge.
That's
And
a
I
big thing.
don't get me wrong. I get that they have those like Carson Beck, right? Like I know he's the projected starter, but one thing he's not mobile. Now he's the big, strong, can make any NFL throw, but like Stetson Bennett won games with his legs and his ability to scramble. And if Beck ends up being the guy, and again, I know they have like the Vanderberg or whatever 5-star kid. It looks like Beck's going to be the guy, but like they're also going back to Mike Bobo, which I guess fans hate, but he also set like a record for one of the best high powered offenses in Georgia's history. But I think there's a lot of turnover. The problem is there's like Bennett was a captain and a ninth year player. You have Carter is gone. Nolan Smith is gone. Like those are foundational captains, not just talented, but captains that they're losing. And the fact that they're going to have no competition until then, if they had one Power 5 conference like Oregon last year, right? They had 1 or 2 years ago, whenever that was, like one name at the beginning of the year that you can at least gauge. I might, but they're good. They're going to sleepwalk to land. That's tough. That's tough to then be like, we haven't played anyone, but let's play this really tough battle teamed, right? Like I just think the SEC West is going to beat Georgia. That's where I'm at. So whether that's Bama, whether that's LSU, and we haven't had a three-peat since like the 30s, since like people weren't wearing face masks and barely had helmets on, and like black people weren't allowed to play. Like, I don't think if Georgia had maybe a starter like a Trevor Lawrence that went 3 full years, and this could be the 3rd year of his, I could see that being the first team to do that.
And is Georgia, are they drinking the rat poison? Is there too much rat poison for them? I don't know. So I think you flipped me. I think I'm going to take Bama over Georgia in the SEC championship, which does change some things in my playoff. Okay. In my Final Four now. Yeah, so, okay. All right. Go ahead, man.
Yeah. I'll take sorry that I derailed you there. So then
I think about this.
That's mine. Sure. But I'll tell you the truth. So I think I feel comfortable in my first 3, to be honest with you. It's that 4th one that has been bothering me. And even as we speak, I might change it. So I'm having a hard time. So I'll talk you through. So I think Michigan, undefeated. Even if they're not undefeated and they have the 1 loss in that round robin, they're going to win that tiebreaker, because when you have Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State tied, the first tiebreaker is strength of schedule. So that bumps out Penn State because they play Northwestern and they're going to be horrific, right? So then it's the tiebreakers between Michigan and Ohio State, and that's a head-to-head. And in this scenario, they would beat Ohio State, and that they would win that tiebreaker. So regardless, I have them there. But I do think they're most likely just going to go undefeated. I do think they'll beat Penn State. But then I have LSU being the undefeated SEC. I would say it might be hard for them to jump Michigan just because they're going to start so high. Michigan starts so high, and Penn State and Ohio State being ranked also high will help them there. I mean, LSU might at the very end have a chance to jump them, but I think those are likely going to be your 1 and 2s or and this could be Alabama, whatever it is. I think like they could be too far down to start to jump, but we'll see. And then I have Texas going undefeated, so I have them beating Bama, so I have them as the 3. So the question for me is who's that 4th team? So I really went back and forth with, I think the Pac-12 is going to cannibalize themselves. So I think, unfortunately, there'll be 2 losses that come there. I think if you're looking at, in this scenario, Georgia being 1 loss but got to the conference championship, they're going to have a better say than Ohio State and Penn State, I would assume. Whoever that team is, 1 loss that didn't, Ohio State got in last year. I just think that's tough. So if we're going to have 2 SEC schools, if it's not going to be Georgia winning it, I think they have more of a say. My question is, I think the committee might consider putting Florida State over Georgia if it's the 1 loss. So I have Florida State losing to LSU, so that would be a quality loss. But if I have them beating Clemson twice, I think the 1 loss conference champion, you would hope the committee would do the right thing and put them over the 1 loss non-conference, even though it's Georgia. I would hope that would be the case. But I'm with you. I really think that I really think I'll do, this will be where I do the smart thing. I do think Florida State's going to lose 2. So I'm going to put Georgia in as the 4, as the 4th one there. And then how that plays out, I think I'm just going to do this to spite, but I'm going to put Georgia in the championship because I think Michigan still is not going to be ready for that. LSU beating Texas, and then I'll have LSU as the champion.
Wow. So, okay. So, wow.
So an SEC matchup. Yeah.
And LSU gets them twice?
Yeah. I know.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I just think like if LSU is who I think they are, similar to the Joe Burrow year, like history has shown when it's not been Bama and Georgia, that team has been the SEC team that survived that has been that team. So, again, whether they are that team this year or maybe it's Bama is obviously going to be the question. But if I'm going to put them there, I got to put them all the way.
Okay. All right. Oh boy, now my brain's in a blender here. Okay, so
I know.
So I don't see Texas being undefeated. I think that they're going to get got somewhere, maybe twice somewhere by some like Texas Tech, or something like that. And I definitely agree with you that I think that the Pac-12 is going to cannibalize itself. So I have a hard time putting like Utah in. And if Bama, I could see them losing a game. I see them losing a game. Like I could see this too. I could see them losing to Texas and then losing to like A&M, for example, but then beating LSU. Then they have one conference loss. And then LSU, if they have a conference loss, then it's a 2-loss, but they lose to Alabama, but they lose like LSU loses someone else. Then Bama would still go to the title game. So you could have a 1 or 2 loss Bama that beats Georgia in the championship game. So Georgia's getting it. So in that case, I can see. So we have Michigan, Florida State. So let's say Michigan 1, Alabama 2, Florida State is my third team because I think they're gonna have a pretty decent time in the ACC, and then Georgia 4, because like that's the only thing. Like I can see them putting Georgia as 4 because they're not a conference champion.
Sure.
And then the championship would be Michigan. If Alabama makes it all the way there, they're gonna beat Florida State. Michigan, Alabama. Champion. I think Michigan gets it done this year. Like that feels right.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I it's one of those things. It's not just me being a rivalry, but Harbaugh's 1-9 in bowl games, including the playoff. So like, they keep losing. Arguably, like I know beating Ohio State the last 2 years has been the big game for them, but now it's unacceptable, right? Now they can't just go to the playoff and lose that game. They can't do it. Like you can't keep doing that. So I just think, unfortunately for them, if you run into Georgia and now Michigan has the beat Georgia aspect of their practice, right?
Yeah.
I think that's and just their natural arrogance. I think that gets them in trouble. And
I'm gonna be honest, I don't feel great about all this. Like I don't feel great about leaving Utah out. I don't feel great about. I feel okay. This
is
about
really
leaving,
hard.
I feel okay about leaving Texas out. I don't feel great about leaving Utah out, though.
You shut your mouth. Texas is back.
Okay, so let's run through it just to summarize. So ACC. So I'll go through my picks, then I'll go through yours.
Okay.
So, or you can go through yours. It's fine.
Sure.
So ACC, I have Florida State over Clemson, Big 10, Michigan over Wisconsin, Big 12, Texas over Oklahoma, Pac-12, Utah over USC, SEC, Alabama over Georgia, Final Four, Michigan, Alabama, Florida State, Georgia, championship game, Michigan beating Alabama.
Okay, so for the ACC, for me, I have Florida State beating Clemson. The Big 10, I have Michigan beating Iowa. In the Big 12, Hook'em, I have Texas beating Kansas State. In the Pac-12, I have Washington beating the Beavers. Come on, baby. Corvallis, I'm in. I got to get to Corvallis. Then in the SEC, I have LSU beating Georgia. And then my playoff is Michigan, the 1, LSU, the 2, Texas, the 3, and Georgia the 4. And then in the championship game, it is LSU and Georgia. And then the Tigers get it done. Brian Kelly and his family is going to make all of us freaking miserable for a year.
I actually would like it better if you had Georgia winning in the championship, but that's
I don't even want to put them in the playoff, but Florida State makes me hesitate. I really think they're gonna get caught by Clemson once, and that's gonna just be enough. If I have LSU beating them, that was what's so hard for me to like. I felt pretty good about the conferences beside the Pac-12. That was really hard to kind of sift through that and really play that game, because I really think last year it was USC had 1 loss in conference, and then like the next 4 teams had 2. So it was like a bunch of tiebreakers that even got, I think, Utah in, and then Utah beat USC. So I think that very similar. That's really hard to gauge, but I think I could see Washington. I really thought about maybe a 1-loss Washington team making it, maybe them only catching 1 loss in the conference play, but I think the other teams are still pretty good. So that was really hard for me. And then that extra, because I could see a world where Penn State is that Ohio State from last year, right? Where they're the 1 loss, really good team, lost to Michigan, right? They have like they beat Ohio State, like that. They could be that team.
There's going to be a lot of talk of SEC bias.
For sure.
If that happens,
like I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's why, like, that's in my mind. I wanted to keep Georgia out, but every time I tried to keep them out, I couldn't find a way to do it.
Yeah.
Like that's it's just by default. It's just by their schedule. It's just and their raw talent. But no, you're right. Yeah, it's tough. But I'm planting my flag at Texas, and God, I wish it had worked out. I will say, and this is all seeding, because I could very well see if it's say LSU Georgia, maybe LSU is the 1, and maybe they play each other to begin with. I could see it maybe being like an LSU Texas matchup in the championship, right?
Ooh,
Texas beating Michigan, LSU beating Georgia. Like I could see that as a flip too. But you know what? Can I change mine? Can I actually do that? Can I?
Yeah. What do you want?
Okay. So I'm going to put LSU as the 1. So that would force them to play Georgia again. And I know the committee's going to hate that, but like, suck it. So I'm going to do that. So then it'll be my chance. And then Michigan will play.
Michigan, Texas, Georgia, LSU, Texas.
Yes. Yeah. In the final. And then LSU still beat Texas.
Gotcha. That'll be fun.
I'll go for fun. So I'll go for fun there. I mean, I'll ultimately, if I pick LSU to win, I'm probably going to win the tournament anyway, like even if I get the other person wrong. But yeah, that's fine. I'll do that. I think that'll be, it's possible, right? Because the SEC bias, they could jump Michigan. Maybe Michigan drops a game to force a different matchup there. So yeah, I'll go with that. I like that. It still is basically the same thing. I still think Michigan loses and whatnot, but maybe, LSU beats Georgia first. Yeah, I like that. Okay. We'll see. This will be fun.
I hate mine. I think you're gonna beat me. I don't feel very good. I'm just looking at it. I don't feel confident.
I mean, this also could be a year where there's like 7 teams that have 1 loss. And it could just be absolute chaos on who the committee chooses this last. But I think this will be I think it's gonna be a great way to end college football as we know it, right? I really think we're going to go out with a bang. Like, I think this is going to be a lot of good competitive matchups, football games. I think the finals are going to be great. Like the playoffs are going to be great. Like I think this is going to be a great way to, segue into the new era of college football, regardless of what happens.
I agree completely.
All right. Any parting thoughts here, Mike?
No, man, that's it. I am excited for all of the I'm excited. But potentially gonna lose. So we'll see.
All right, yeah. So please check out our website. So whiskerswhiskies.com and also our Instagram, whiskers.whiskies. And we are going to be posting our bracket on there for you all to see and keep track of. Also, next week, we are starting Tales of the Trophies. It is
Hell yeah.
back. Season 3. We're tackling the Big 12, which we thought was going to die, but they are surviving. But they are losing their 2 marquee schools. So we thought we would go through that conference. And the very first episode we're going to talk about is actually a newbie to the Big 12, but we're going to talk about the battle for the keg of nails, which is going to be also exciting. We could potentially have some guests. We have a couple friends that are Louisville alums that could potentially join us, but it's going to be exciting. We're really excited for season 3, so please check out all of that stuff and stay tuned because we're back. I think Texas is back. College football's back. It's just everything's back.
Everything's back, baby.
All right, so for Mike, I'm EJ. Always remember, too much of anything is bad, but too much good whiskey is barely enough.
Cheers, boys.